Also, it's 9 a.m. I don't want to keep everybody, here for that long. It's 9 a.m. I think. Or am I a little bit late? Am I late? I think I'm late. All right, welcome back to CIMFest 2023. This is the first time we're in person since 2019, if I'm not mistaken. Good to have everyone back in this room, and I'm glad to be back in here, especially kicking things off, as I did back in 2016 as well. I think it works out perfectly. So I'm Anthony Obando. I'm going to be talking to you guys about the history of video games today. I think I'm supposed to say something about myself. I teach high school now, no longer middle school. They saved me from that. So now I'm teaching judgmental high schoolers instead of judgmental middle schoolers. All right, so let's get talking about video games. So I'm going to open up the same way that I did back in 2016 about thinking about how we got here, because it's now 2023. We're have 9 generations of consoles, and now we're so obsessed about these graphics that we kind of forgot about how we even got here. Because it isn't about making the pretty game, it's about making a game that works. So let's actually see games that worked and how we got here. So let's start back in World War II with some guy named Alan Turing. I don't know if you've heard of this guy, or if you've even watched Imitation Game or anything related to CS. I think some people know a thing or two here about CS, maybe? Maybe. Some of you guys got degrees, some of you are going through the track. I mean, we have the chair here. Hey, Dr. Khan. We have the chair here. I think maybe he knows a thing or two. Maybe? Okay. So after World War II finished, which, spoiler alert, the Nazis lost. I think that's I think that's major spoilers. I don't know. I haven't read my history book in a while. Turing finished up the project at Bletchley Park and then moved on to work with artificial intelligence. And at this time, games are not being made for entertainment. Games are just strictly for testing technology. Whole point is we have this cool hardware. We want to see if we can push this. So make something that will see if it will break or not. So you start making games. Originally it was a chess simulator, and then 10 years in 1948, and then 10 years later we get the first game that was designed for entertainment, Tennis for Two. It was for entertainment, but still they had this idea of we want to see what we can do with technology. But then it wasn't until 1962 that MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, got to give credit where credit's due and make sure I say all my acronyms fully, released the first commercialized game. And then we enter our first generation of consoles, our first generation of games, technically. So from 63 to 78, I know that there's always there's always different resources that tell me that I'm wrong, but I'm going to tell them that they're wrong as well, even though I have no credible sources and they have no credible sources, because this is all really from 2 people who've gone on Wikipedia for way too long. So 63 to 78, we start with having quarter-operated cabinets, because when people realize, hey, you can make money off of this, business people are going to do what business people do best, and that is going to commercialize it, make money off of it. So people spend a quarter, play a game. You have different games that were made between that, and then we reach a point that, hey, here's a novel idea. Take the video games home. You don't have to worry about going to arcade anymore. You take this home with you. So a little company called Magnavox created the first console in 1972, the Magnavox Odyssey. And they had this whole thing of, no processor, we'll sell this for $100. And you'll also get some cool overlays that you attach to your TV that comes with this. Because you didn't have any graphics for this whatsoever. It was all black and white, and they just kind of expected you to put the overlay on the TV as well. I mean, it was one heck of a cartridge. This is advanced. This is advanced right here. Only selling 28 games, really, on one platform. But then the first real console was the Fairchild Channel F in 1976, selling for about $170, which that's $500 in our currency right now. You got to account for inflation. Spending way too much still. Spending way too much on a console. Then a year later, Atari joins the mix of making game consoles with the Atari 2600, $200. And this will be the console that kind of drives video games all the way until the crash in '83. Spoiler alert. Video games die for a little bit and then come back. But the main problem with this has always been PC. Because, yeah, it's great that you have these cool graphics, but my PC can run text-based games. I got Theater of the Mind. What do you got? I got Theater of the Mind. You got these really bad-looking graphics and also a light gun. A toy gun, really, that you're going to connect that? I'll go buy a real one, and then I'll also have my text-based games while I'm at it. So after 78, we enter into what is known as the golden age of video games, and it's hard to now define what retro is, but this was retro at one time. So arcade cabinets were the up and up, but unfortunately, pool tables and pinball tables were just more popular. Still a little bit better at that time. This is when we start getting games that we know of, like Galaga, Space Invaders. You have your early shoot-'em-ups. We have Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, a few other games coming out at this time. PC gaming is now being more popular with the ZX Spectrum. I now realize that I said it wrong all those years back by calling it the ZX Spectrum. It is the ZX Spectrum. Hopefully the Brits don't come for me. If they do, I'll give them the address of my old workplace. They don't have to come for me where I'm at now. The Commodore as well, Commodore 64, the Commodore VIC-20 to the Commodore 64. And also at this time you have handhelds. Some company, I don't know if you've heard of them, called Milton Bradley. They make board games. They actually made the first handheld, the Microvision, but you're selling that for $100, and the cartridge is actually the faceplate. So then, yeah, your whole thing of you want to replace the game, cool, just take off the little faceplate, put on a brand new one. Totally not going to break your console by that point after you switch it maybe 3 times. And then also Nintendo created the Game & Watch, so these mini games that you'd have in your pocket that you just like fold up like a modern Nintendo DS, stuck in your pocket, take it out, play a little bit. So, 1983. Now, I need to give a little bit of context for this. We got to look at 1982 really quick, because this is early 1983. 1982, I don't know if you've guys heard of Steven Spielberg or seen any of his movies. I know some of you have, especially if you've seen the Danger Dice setup out there and you know every single reference that's coming from that, then you've definitely seen a Spielberg film. So he made this little movie called E.T. that is now reaching, I think, like, what, 40th anniversary this year or something? It was last year. Math is not my strong suit. They had me teach math for a year, and then they got rid of me because I was doing too good at it. But he releases E.T., which at this time, this is the summer movie to watch. This is the movie to watch. Everyone's seeing it. It's great. So companies are going to do what they do best. They see something that's making a lot of money. They want to jump on that bandwagon. All right, that's making money. We got to do something that's going to make money as well. Make a game of it. When we see that happen now, people make games. But at this time, this is one of the first movies to get a game made out of it. It would be great, right? Make it in 6 months with people that don't know what they're doing. I think anyone who has actually made a game here knows that nowadays it's almost impossible to make a good game in 6 months. Unless you want a ton of bugs in there. Joe, your shirt speaks for itself about fixing games and debugging it. So, game sells, Christmas morning, kids are opening it, they put it in their Atari 2600, and it's bad. It's just bad. But you know what the biggest problem with all this was? They didn't read the instruction manual. Because in order to play games at this time, you had to do this little thing called reading. Something that I think a lot of us have forgotten about. I don't know who reads in here still. You don't get to say anything anymore for the rest of the presentation. I'm revoking your talking privileges. So, they didn't read the instruction manual because they're so excited to get this new toy. They want to play it, and then they don't know what's going on. So then they complain and send it back because we didn't have internet forums that you could just say, hey, patch your game. Add a tutorial. No, they just sent it back. So now all these stores are having all their product coming back, and what are they going to do with it? They can't sell it. No one wants it. It's word of mouth. Everyone's telling everybody, hey, this game sucks. Don't get it. Don't get it for your kids. It was a waste of my money. They hated it, and they sent it back. So now they send it back all the way to the game developers. And what are they going to do with all this stock? They bury it. Because what are you going to do? Sell it on eBay? No. We haven't hit 2,000. No one's going to want to care. No one cares about getting retro yet. This is the modern times. So they go out to the middle of New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, somewhere in that area, and they just dig a ditch and bury all of it. And then everyone swears off video games in 1982, saying, no more. Because the other problem was that games are being half done. You have incomplete games that are being shelled out for a dime a dozen. And they're expecting you to take this. I mean, we're still doing that. Look at Battlefield. Call of Duty, yeah, sorry. What? I think Is this someone? You okay? You okay? Hey, don't say anything about Pokemon. I will die on that hill. Graphics don't make a game. So we had also a lot of innovative consoles at this time die. A lot of consoles at this time, you had actually the consoles built into a TV. So you'd buy a TV and a console at the same time. And then a lot of these didn't even see market because of E.T. But a few years back, they actually went out to that ditch and dug up all these games. And they actually brought an Atari 2600 with them, and it worked. The games still work. It's still no, actually, some people have said it's even better than Call of Duty. I mean, I wouldn't blame them. I got my Dark Matter camo, and then I kind of stopped playing. I mean, I even went back and started playing Pokemon Ruby Sapphire. I'm still on day 3 of trying to catch Latias because my RNG's bad. And also, I don't know how to solder a battery in, so I can't go grow my berries. What, do you know how to use a soldering iron? It's a yes or no thing. It ain't a little bit. No, it's a yes or no thing. This is okay, then you do it for me then. Break my game. Go ahead. Then you owe me money if you break it. All right, so games are bad. No one wants them, so who's going to come in? This little company over in Japan by the name of Nintendo that's been around since 1800s, making playing cards, now shows up and dominates the industry. But if no one wants to buy a video game console, how do you do it? You market it as a toy. You don't say it's a video game console, you say it's a toy. So that little guy up there, for anyone who's played the fighting game that was Super Smash Bros., know who Rob is, because you wouldn't know if it wasn't for Smash Bros. You mean the best character ever? I can't say anything. I'm a trash Lucina main. So they sell Rob about $180. You get Rob, 2 games, and the console. But the thing is, this is a toy. You just gotta go out to Walmart or whoever's Radio Shack, if those are still around, and buy a D battery, 2 D batteries specifically. Plug them up, and he works. But of course, this is a toy. This is not a video game. This is a toy. But that's how they sold it. And then after a while, people realized, oh, I don't need Rob to use this. To get my entertainment out of this, I don't need Rob. So they stopped selling Rob, and instead you just get the Nintendo Entertainment System on its own. Plug it into the TV, and now games are back in the household. It's a household. Video games are a household name. Now Nintendo's dominating. They're creating a bunch of games. You got Mario, Zelda, Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy. You have all these games that are coming out in the 80s, giving way to what we have now. And it's all cartridge-based. You plug in the cartridge, you turn it on. We're not used to cartridges anymore unless you're a retro gamer. You guys are way too spoiled with discs. If even you guys use discs anymore. I told my PC players, stop installing games. Stop installing games and go back. We need to reject modernity and embrace tradition of putting discs and cartridges in. So now video games are back in the household, and now we also have reached the first patch for a game. So the ZX Spectrum saw a platformer called Jet Set Willy that got patched because it was too hard. I know, skill issue. Clearly, they've never played a Dark Souls game. And clearly, you don't own an air fryer. You're talking way too much. I'm kidding. All right, so now let's move up from between 1984 and 87 to the late 80s, early 90s. So, Nintendo's making a ton of money. It's great. But the thing is that other people want that money. When one person's making too much money, that's a problem because then you enter something called a monopoly. Disney knows about this. You can ask them, although they won't admit to it. So another company shows up, and they make something in '88 called the Mega Drive. This little company known as Sega, originally actually making consoles for the U.S. military. Yeah, I didn't know that either. If it weren't for me, buying a book one day and then reading through this entire thing, I wouldn't have learned that Sega actually made consoles originally for the U.S. military. And then they went to entertainment in the 80s. So they made the Mega Drive and then rebranded it as the Genesis 1 year later and sold it stateside. So now Sega's here taking the competition. Nintendo isn't going to have that, so they got to do what they do best and innovate. 1989, they released their handheld, the Game Boy. And the Game Boy would be popular until they re-released it as the Game Boy Color in the late 90s, early 2000s. So now we have our first console war, Sega versus Nintendo. But Nintendo comes out on top with the Super Nintendo in 91 and the classic game made by a little company known as Rareware, that is Donkey Kong Country, and its 2 sequels. Now also at this time we start seeing CD-ROMs as a thing because Nintendo decided to pair up with this other company called Sony, and they started making a disc drive that would attach to the bottom of your console. It never sold outside of Japan. I mean, the Famicom and the Super Famicom never really sold outside Japan. They rebranded it as the Nintendo, but they didn't sell any of the cool peripherals aside from the light gun. And that was even just the Nintendo Entertainment System. We never got to see the disc drive. Then we also have the creation of the ESRB rating system because of one small game, which I'll get to in a bit. I just need to talk about the law really quick. I'm not a lawyer, so don't take this as legal advice. So I've already shown you a bunch of games that have already been made, but I haven't talked about the fighting game yet. Because in 1987 is when technically one of your early fighting games that got popular were made. But the thing is, it was terrible. Has anyone played the original Street Fighter? The original 1987 one. I'm not talking about Street Fighter 2. Okay, so then, okay, great. You know about that trash. It played terribly. Even Capcom admitted it played terribly. I mean, the thing was that also you had 2 buttons. You had a punch and a kick button, and the whole point was that you were supposed to press the button harder because it would do more damage. It did have to start somewhere, you're right, and that's how it started, because the problem is that you had people do this and break arcade cabinets, and that's a lot of money. So we can't do that, so we're going to switch it to a 6-button layout. And the game was still bad. The game was still bad, and then they realized they needed to make money somehow, because also half their development team left and created SNK. So they got to make money somehow. So in 1991, they overhauled the entirety of Street Fighter and released Street Fighter 2 with the sole purpose of making the first one look like a knockoff. And SNK saw this, and also a little company called Data East. And of course, we don't know who Data East is because they're probably not around still, because they got the pants sued off of them. So Capcom made Street Fighter 2, and Data East made Fighter's History 2 years later. I present to you on one side Street Fighter 2, and on the other I present to you Fighter's History. The suit was because they said 3 of their characters were stolen: Guile, Ken, and Chun-Li. The verdict was that, yes, they did bar similarities to the characters, but you can't copyright a stereotype. I can make my own fighting game with a person who throws fireballs, has an uppercut, and a spinning roundhouse kick, and I'm not violating anything. But, of course, Capcom wanted to keep as much money as they could and try to own the fighting game industry while they could, so they sued the pants off of them, even though Art of Fighting released the same year as Street Fighter 2, and it was just as much of a knockoff of Street Fighter 2. So, now let's look at everything that of note things. So 1992 was when Mortal Kombat released, and that created the ESRB rating system, because apparently it's not appropriate for little children to see, skulls get ripped off. I gave this presentation to my middle schoolers, and they said it's completely appropriate, and I fear for the future generations. I fear for kids nowadays. That, and they also told me they play GTA frequently. That's why you're messed up in the head, is because you played Mortal Kombat as a kid. That's why you're messed up. Well, at least you got an anatomy lesson out of it, didn't you?
Yeah, I passed science with men.
That's not surprising, though. You try really hard with school, so that's why it doesn't surprise me. I'll give you the quiz for this afterwards. 40 questions, multiple choice, some free response. So now the arcade cabinets have to die because all good things have to come to an end, and now arcades start dying out slowly because of another fighting game made by the same people who made Donkey Kong Country called Killer Instinct. Because apparently the quadruple S tier is not supposed to exist, and we shouldn't have an infinite combo in our game. I'm still going to say that's a skill issue, but they realized game balance is a thing, and they went and fixed it, but it cost them a lot of money. So then, if this is the problem, either you put out a game that's good, or you're going to waste money fixing it. Take that lesson to heart. Street Fighter 2 releases in 91 and begins the fighting game craze of the 90s, and also we have every core mechanic of a fighting game there, combos, and also a killer soundtrack. And then this new guy releases a game for the Nintendo Entertainment System, one of the few last ones made. His name is Masahiro Sakurai. He made a game called Kirby's Dream World. He's definitely not going to be important later. We have some non-licensed Nintendo games that I have to mention. I'm legally obligated to say this. I've been told by everybody that I need to, and by that I'm lying. No one has told me I need to mention this, and they want me to bury this. Hotel Mario, Link, Faces of Evil, and Zelda 1 of Gamelon, the non-licensed Nintendo games from the Philips CDI era of the 90s. If you're familiar with the old days of YouTube and YouTube poops, then you are very familiar with this, whether you want to admit it or not. And 1992, we get the competitor to Mario that is Sonic the Hedgehog, even though the flagship title for the Sega was Mega Man. Sonic is more relevant than Mega Man. Sorry to say that. Because, I mean, Sonic got added first to Smash Bros. Before Mega Man. Cry about it. Alright, now I gotta cover 10 years in a short amount of time. So, Nintendo thinks that they're on top of everything because they made Donkey Kong Country, so they decided to make a handheld that was also a VR headset. They made the Virtual Boy. It was bad. No one wants to talk about it. But I have to talk about it here. So while they were failing with the Virtual Boy, they were working on a new game engine called what they called the Ultra 64 engine. That, and also because Rareware accidentally advertised it with Killer Instinct 2. And in 1996, we get the Nintendo 64. But there's one problem. The Nintendo 64 is not going to win in this time of video game history because you released the PlayStation in 1994. And the Sega Saturn releases in 1994. Even though PlayStation wins this era because memory cards and a ton of great PS1 games. And Sega Saturn kind of falls in second place because of their little issue they had, a hardware issue of having a battery control your save data. Everyone kind of learned this one the hard way. I even had to learn it the hard way when I found a refurbished copy of Pokemon Silver. And that's when I learned that batteries saved the save state. And I was upset. But Nintendo had to then come in and try to earn some money. So in 1998, they released the Game Boy Color, taking all of their games that were originally on this green and black pixelated screen and put them in full-blown color. You're supposed to be surprised by that. It's a big thing. At this time, it's a big thing. But PC is still, of course, dominating. I'm not going to be speaking a lot about PC because PC still does better than consoles. No matter what, no matter which way you want to cut it, PC is going to do better. And I feel as though I'm going to be saying the same thing 15 times if every slide I say PC did better than everybody. But I have to say this because of the first person one of the first FPSs created, Doom, from id Software, 1993. It was a little trick they did for 3D. It wasn't even 3D. They made it look 3D. Because that's why you have a shotgun with stupid range. So we have two generations of consoles that happen here. So 93 to 98 is the 5th generation, and the 6th generation is 98 to 2003. We had a lot of developments here pretty quickly. Alright, there's a lot here. Try to rapid fire this. 1996, one of the first 3D platformers, Super Mario 64. We're not counting Bubsy, that didn't exist. 1997, Rareware, still people that they got a group of people that didn't know how to make games, and they told them to make a movie tie-in game for 1995's GoldenEye. You know, no pressure. You're just gonna make a game off of one of the best-selling movies of 1995 that had Pierce Brosnan. No pressure. But then they would take it, it would become popular, and they would fix it and make it better in 2000 with Perfect Dark Zero. So that Masahiro Sakurai guy comes back and actually creates a brand new IP using existing Nintendo characters in 1999 called Super Smash Bros. Despite his philosophy of avoiding sequels, it spawned 5 sequels. I'm counting DS and Wii U as separate. Fight me about it later. 1996, Nintendo releases one of their biggest titles and still ongoing franchises, now going on 9 generations with the Paldea region, Pokemon. Pokemon Red, Blue releasing this year. Well, Red and Green releasing this year. Then they re-released it on stateside as Red and Blue. And then they fix it by releasing a 3rd game called Yellow. We need to go back to doing that. 1999, this guy named Tony Hawk does something called the 900, and then he got a game made about him. Even though they told them 6 months to make a game, and it became the first extreme sports game to be popularized. Yeah, we had Madden and hockey, before that, but it wasn't until Tony Hawk entered the house that people cared about sports games, really. Because it came out on 3 platforms, and it was still one of the best sports games to this day. I still have a copy of it. Don't fight me. What? Yes. I may have messed up my knee. I messed up my knee at Kona. It was worth it. All right, so you have 2 platformers. You have the new competitor, the new mascot, because everyone had a mascot. So Crash Bandicoot comes in as a competitor to Nintendo because PlayStation needed something. They then got Spyro. Banjo-Kazooie releases in 98 because Rareware is still making games until they don't. Doom releases in 93. First 3D RPG releases in 1997, Final Fantasy VII. If you bought the remake, you were stealing yourself out of money. You were losing money by doing that because they're releasing 2 more parts out of it. And I don't own a PS5. And you need a PS5 to get the next part. And I'm not spending $500 on that. So then a new competitor joins the mix, also of game consoles at this time in 2001. A little company known as Microsoft. They made a console. And then their launch title was this cool, neat first-person shooter called Halo. Halo Combat Evolved. Kind of got popular with its sequel, Halo 2, and its multiplayer. And then Halo 3. But I'm jumping too far ahead. Then you have 2 games that are competed as the best games of all time, which are Half-Life and Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. But now Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is no longer in that running because of something called Tears of the Kingdom. You need to stop talking. Stop ruining this for everybody. It don't matter about the bugs. I played Sword and Shield with all the bugs that it had, and I still had a good time. You are a party pooper. There's the door. He needs to take your class. That guy. Yes, officer, that man right there in the gray shirt. That one right there. That one right there needs to take your class, and that graphics don't make a game. I didn't even take your class, and I knew that. How about a game that works? Storylines are great. Assassin's Creed was great, but how about a game that works? Have you tried that? But I'm saying, how about you play a game that works? That's what makes a game. All right, so people are now realizing that they can do things on their own because a bunch of Half-Life mods led to Counter-Strike. And now we got Counter-Strike 2 recently. Counter-Strike 2. You have life simulation games with this dude named Will Wright. I don't know if some of you guys have met him or something. I didn't get to meet him. I'm sad about that. They didn't tell me he was going to be somewhere. But he makes The Sims, and we started seeing life simulation games. Shenmue, a little underground game that no one really knew about at the time, actually created the QuickTime event. So if you ever played a game that has you press buttons at a certain times and you hate it, blame this series. Just don't invent a time machine and go kill that guy, because then you're going to actually make some bad games in the future, probably. So Sega ends their run of making consoles here with the Dreamcast. While yes, they were technically the best of everyone, they just couldn't keep up anymore. The demands of their console with everything that they were trying to do versus the Xbox and now the PlayStation 2 just couldn't keep up. So they retire from making consoles and go strictly to games. And I'm about to make a lot of people feel old in here. 2001, the PS2 released. 6 years later, we got the PS3. The GameCube releases in 2001, the DS in 2004, and the Nintendo Wii in 2006. The Xbox releases in 2001, and in 2005, the Xbox 360. You feel old yet? And also you have the 7th generation, and it happens in 2 years. A whole generation of consoles. Now, we're used to seeing this that'd be like at least 5 years. We're seeing this happen in 2. Too quick. I feel old. Bring me back the Game Boy Advance and playing Ruby Sapphire. All right. So, we now are trying to bridge between games and actually fitness and all these different peripherals. So, Wii Fit does a whole peripheral with a balance board in 2007. And the wonderful PR that was Reggie fills me saying his body is ready. His body is ready. He is ready to realize that he is not ready for Wii Fit. The Sims released in 2000, spawning all the different sequels and spin-offs. Plastic instrument genre, that is its own separate genre. I will count that as its own separate genre. You can go find me somewhere else about it. Guitar Hero 3 and Rock Band released in 2007 as competitors to one another, releasing the plastic instrument genre and also creating the hardest song in a rhythm game to date. Nothing will beat Through the Fire and Flames, even if you overchart a song, because that's not official. Clone Hero you can take your Clone Hero cake and eat it somewhere else, not here. Call of Duty 4 released in 2007 as the only Call of Duty game to get Game of the Year. Cry about it. Never get Game of the Year again. Cold War was fun, though. Cold War. Rod, can I officially kick someone out? He's banned. No, out. You, get out. You have said controversial statements. Controversial statements. I am not okay with that. Black Ops 2 is still the best. Halo series releases in 2001 and still going to this day. That's why I've put present. I've been wanting to put its final year there for such a long time because this franchise has gone on for too long. I had a whole student that told me the entire Halo lore. I zoned out after Halo 1. Grand Theft Auto becomes popular this time with San Andreas releasing in 2004 and being re-released actually only 2 years ago? That's why I bought an original copy of San Andreas so I can enter the G codes. World of Warcraft is an RPG that's still going to this date. I have the 2004 release date, even though all their DLCs are still going, and you can't get that World Explorer achievement because they're adding so much. All right, so 2008, 2013-ish. I have to put ish because the release of the Wii U, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One kind of create this small divide in the generations. But at the same time, we're wrapping up everything here with the 360 and PS3 and the Wii. Also because of my resources saying that 2008 marks the next generation because of mobile gaming. Mobile games are games too. Call of Duty, Rock Band, a few other games actually are beginning to surge with their downloadable content and releasing what was supposed to be add-ons to your games that make it better. I mean, look at Assassin's Creed 2. The DLC for that actually made the game better and finished the story out. You didn't need it, but you could get it. But now we're making games that are incomplete okay. Because you need the DLC to finish this game. You need the DLC to make this game better. We now enter this also era of esports with the one game that I'm going to acknowledge as esports, even though some other people will fight me, especially if Hi-Res is here and they want to come hang me, they're more than welcome to. League of Legends. League of Legends creating esports, and now the big issue of cross-platform. Because I own an Xbox, my friend owns a PlayStation, we both own Call of Duty, I want to dog on him in Modern Warfare 2 with an intervention, but I can't. I can't because of the fact that everyone's protective of their servers. So now this issue about cross-platform arises, and I can't play with my friends because he owns a PlayStation, and I own an Xbox. So there's an issue. And then everyone starts arguing about what the best platform is. And if you say anything that is not PC, you are incorrect. Because PC is still beating everybody at this time. Because we're able to mod games. We can mod Skyrim. You can also possibly mod Skyrim on your refrigerator. And your PlayStation. And your toaster. I mean, I clearly own Skyrim on my refrigerator.
There's also Skyrim on your Alexa.
Yes. Yes, there is. Skyrim VR. All right. 2009 begins the release of the Soulsborne series, with Demon Souls being re-released on the PS5, if anyone owns a PS5, that is. League of Legends in 2009, Battlefield 4 in 2013. I have to say this because of being bugged on launch and people falling through the floor, and then apparently it's okay to ask sound designers at Siege, hey, your game sucked because I fell through the floor, but they're only sound designers, and they did their job because you're still hearing things when you fall through the floor. Destiny releases in 2014. That was kind of bad because you had to buy DLC for it. But now that's kind of the norm of buying DLC for games. This is also a hint for anyone that's making games to actually release a full game. Collectibles started taking America by storm with Amiibos, although it originally started with Skylanders. I have to say Amiibos because we kind of forgot about Skylanders. You're weird. You're weird because you still remember Skylanders and you said Cold War was bad. I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to deny that Skylanders is good. There's nothing wrong with collecting them. I'm going to be real with you, man. There's nothing wrong. I'm just making jokes up here because I think I'm funny. So now also here we get games that are being remastered. I mean, we've been doing this since the early 2000s because Nintendo decided that they wanted to revamp their entire series of Pokemon, so they re-released Fire Red and Leaf Green. Call of Duty becomes the most reused franchise after 10 years of games after they released COD Ghosts. And then the greatest game of all time, that is Minecraft. How much do I gotta pay you to like physically drag this guy out? How much do I gotta pay you? I'm tired of this Minecraft slander. He already said one thing saying it's a mid game. I'm tired of the slander. He slandered Minecraft saying it's an okay game. It's only good if you have friends. Alright, so now I gotta take a quick break from all this console junk to talk about mobile gaming and VR and AR. So, summer 2016, the biggest AR game to be released was Pokemon Go. People still play that, apparently. PSVR releases in 2016 of October. The HTC Vive releases in April of 2016. The HoloLens releases in March 2016. And all these projects of actually utilizing VR and AR to be helpful instead of just making games. Uncharted VR, what? No, Uncharted. I'm talking about VR and AR here. If we're not, if it's not VR and AR, then we can't put it here. One day we'll get Uncharted on VR, and I think people will pay for that. People will pay for it, like they paid for Skyrim on the refrigerator. All right, current era, 2016 to 2023. 4K resolution now becomes a thing, and we're going to go ahead and start putting everything 4K compatible, so you better buy that 4K TV. If you don't have $300 for a 4K TV, tough luck. 9th generation begins in 2017 with the release of the Nintendo Switch, and going all the way to now what is the PlayStation 5. The PS4 Pro releases in 2016, and the Xbox One X in 2017, with beginning this 4K compatible era, and the Nintendo Switch releasing in 2017 with the launch title that is Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Alright, everything between 2017 and 2022. You have Destiny 2 releasing in 2017. It's 4K, it's great. Graphics are wonderful, but the game sucks. Because I thought you said graphics made a game. You said earlier graphics made the game. You said, I am taking your statement and I'm using it against you. You said graphics made a game. Liar! So do I. Because it's better. Because also you didn't need the graphics to make the game. Battlefield 1 releases in 2016 with this new idea of free DLC. From EA. Yeah, of all companies, EA. EA's making free DLC, but it was a business gambit. They were doing something. They were starting something new. Well, another company was. Sonic Mania releases in 2017 because we cannot let old habits die. We remastered COD 4 in 2017, but that was only because Infinite Warfare was something no one wanted to buy. Clone Hero releases in 2017 as the Guitar Hero clone we wanted. Because instead I could actually rip everything from the old Guitar Hero games and put it all on one platform. That's not illegal. Breath of the Wild releases in 2017 as the contender for best game of all time. Now we're going to scrub that and actually replace it with Tears of the Kingdom. And the fact that now I can play Tony Hawk Legend of Zelda Edition. War Crimes and the fact that I can take Korok and go across the entirety of the kingdom on a crucifix. You could start a religion with that. Now, unfortunately, despite every part of me not wanting to do this, I have to. Fortnite releasing in 2017 as the highest grossing free-to-play game of all time. Let that sink in for a bit. Highest grossing free-to-play game of all time. It's a business gambit they did with this whole battle pass idea that everyone then started taking. It's a terrible business practice in my opinion, but it's one that works. Yo, where's Despacito 2? I take your Warzone 2 and I raise you Despacito 2. Spyro and Crash Bandicoot get a remaster in 2019 because apparently we've been wanting that. That actually is kind of something we wanted because everyone wants to go. We are rejecting modernity at this point. Reject modernity. Return to tradition. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 gets released in 2020 in the height of the demonetization virus. I can't say it because this is on YouTube and this is probably going to be stayed on YouTube, and I think y'all want your monetization money. So I can't say the virus name. I can't say I got demonetized for it if I say it. The demonetization virus. The demonetization virus, COVID, comes around. It actually has made games harder to make it this time, but still, they're pushing through. So any game that's actually released between 2020 and 2022, I kind of excuse for not being the best because everyone's being forced to work from home. And Elden Ring, most importantly, as the most recent game of the year, and it is a very accessible Soulsborne game. If you've never played a Soulsborne game, you have no experience with it, you can pick up Elden Ring and still do fine. Because it's too easy. It's like playing Pokemon X and Y the first time you over-level. Alright, so that, and of course, 2023 now, with where we're at, with Tears of the Kingdom as the most recent release. Most recent notable release. I'm not going to count anything that's been released, and I'm stopping with the remasters. I'm stopping the remasters with where we're at right now. No more remasters. Because then I have to start saying Last of Us remastered, and what other remasters are there? GTA remastered. I'm tired of the remasters. Let's just cut it here and go to talking about what happened bad all these years. Alright. So, what is it you can do to prevent games from actually, not sucking? Well, one, don't care about your graphics. You need to learn to not care about your graphics and actually care about making a good game. I've said this multiple times. Make the mechanics first. I've even taught my students this. Make your mechanics first. Your cosmetics can wait. I had a student actually do that. They actually made their cosmetics first and then the game last. And then they spent an entire class period sitting at my desk complaining, why isn't my game working? Because you cared more about your cosmetics than actually making a functioning game. Keep your IPs close, but not too close. That's the first thing. Nintendo CDI. That little stint with the Philips CDI that they made terrible flops. I can't even say anything bad about them because I love those cutscenes. They're so terrible, they're good. It's like watching Tommy Wiseau's The Room. You gotta keep your IPs close, but don't keep them too close. Let people try them out. Let people use them. But don't be Nintendo and start striking everybody that makes anything better than you. I have to mention this 3D platformer, Bubsy the Bobcat, because his death happened on the PS1 with his 3D platformer. Look at the top right corner and all those pixels. We've never seen him again for a reason. Even though there is someone out there that's probably making a remake. Movie-based video games have always been sort of bad. We saw that originally with E.T. And then also making game-based movies. But I can't say that anymore because of the company that is Illumination and making the Mario movie. That was actually kind of good. Even if they did have majority of the budget just went to music. Majority of it was just me sitting there listening to Take On Me and trying to hit the high note because that's what you do when you listen to Take On Me. Alright, and trying to please the community. You can't make everybody happy, so stop trying to make everybody happy. I read that in a book once. If you sit and try to make everybody happy, you're not going to have a good game. You're instead just going to be a crowd pleaser, and then no one's going to like your game. And most importantly, Make a game that is playable on launch. Tony Hawk 5 releases in 2015, and the initial update was twice the size of the base game. I'm sorry, but I take that your Pokemon complaints, and I raise you a 12 gigabyte update on day one. That's not twice the size. That's not twice the size. Tony Hawk 5 releases as a 5 gigabyte game, and then the first update is 10. How much do I gotta pay you to kick this guy out? How much do I gotta pay someone to get rid of this guy? I'm tired of his slander. Slander! Alright. A big problem in the industry is oversaturation, because if we have too much of a good thing, it dies. First-person shooters. Plastic instrument games. Battle royales. You have too much of a good thing, it's going to kill the game genre. A lot of games that are out there are actually kind of good, but the problem is that we can't see that they're good because something else has killed it. And now, more recently, as the most recent addition to this oversaturation problem is mascot horror. Indie mascot horror, and some guy back in 2014 who made 4 games in 2 years that were all functional, by the way. They were all functional. Impressive. A guy named Scott Cawthon actually made a lot of games in a short amount of time, but now, because of his popularity, everyone's oversaturating the market with it. That's how you kill a game pretty quickly. So what's next? I don't know, whenever we get 8K. Why aren't we happy? Because we don't know what we want. Just play what makes you happy at this point. There is no best game of all time. I'm just saying all this because I know there's someone who's going to be happy if I say something about that. Is there a master platform? No. All that matters is you're having fun with the games that you play. That's all that matters. That's what games are for. It's for fun, not to be better than anyone or make something. I mean, there are some art masterpieces of games. Like, Doki Doki Literature Club is a masterpiece of horror. In terms of writing and storytelling, it is a masterpiece of horror. There are games that are masterpieces, there are games that are not, but as long as you have fun, that's what matters. All right, any questions, comments, concerns, cries of outrage in these last 5 minutes that I've been given that Andrew kind of held a 5? Either who's told me to shut up, I can't remember. All right, Valencia, what's your question? Yes, that is correct, but at the same time, Mortal Kombat is still remembered, and it's still going on to this day. I mean, we're about to get another Mortal Kombat game sometime this year or next year, I want to say. September of this year? God dang! I mean, we got Street Fighter 6 this year, so I mean, I can't really complain. We're having games that are going from the 90s still today. Yes? Never played it, but I will not argue with you. All right, any questions? Yes. So we've been doing consoles since 2000s. The modern consoles that we have now, Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft, we've been seeing since the early 2000s. We've gotten used to it. We know it almost inside and out. The hardware is a little bit easier for us to access and actually work with, even though we've been using PCs for such a long time and have been playing games on them, making games using them. The reason that we have all these PC issues is because of the fact that we're trying to upgrade the graphics. If people weren't so concerned about getting 60 FPS 4K and being able to see the pores on characters' faces when they're playing Final Fantasy VII Remastered, then we wouldn't have these issues. Even simple games that have very rudimentary graphics are perfect because we're focusing on the game mechanics rather than making them look pretty. So even then, you're sitting 30 FPS on console, but the game works fine because you're not concerned about graphics. Last question, Dr. Obando. Can we hold that for afterwards then? Because I want to get one last question in. Please tell me it's an actual question. Quickly, go. Why stop EA and Nintendo Direct's demonetization virus? And then everyone starts getting all these hopes up for games, and then when they're let down, then the company gets backlash for it. You can't make promises that you can't keep, and that's the problem with it. Because if I'm going to say that I'm going to make you a great game, it's going to be wonderful, but then I don't deliver on it, who are you going to be mad at? You're going to be mad at me for making the game. Because I failed to do something that I promised you. And a lot of companies are doing that. They're failing to deliver on these promises. Maybe if we stop making all these over-the-top things and all these big promises and focus on just core mechanics and actually a game that works, base functionality, we can actually start making some good games again. All right. Thank you, guys.
I'm live. I'm live. Is the mic okay? Okay. Hi. I am Joe Puzzles by Joe, but I have an intro in a second here. So this talk, which we'll get to the title here too. Okay, so this is a quote from one of my fans that summed up the Clutter games quite well, I thought. Says, you know what you'll get with each Clutter game? It's always the same, yet each game is always different. That's the magic of the Clutter series. Why isn't that working? Oh, there we go. Okay. I've been doing this for 12 plus years, and my 14 Clutters to date has netted me about 1.7 million in those 12 years. And the name of this talk is called Outing the Grind, Finding the Fun in Game Design, Clutter, and Life. This is my 7th CIMFest talk, and that's my email up there. I am Joe Cassavaugh, and I want to thank these guys. They've been doing this for 8 years, I think. I think I started the second CIMFest, and I've been talking at each one, I think, since. And I'm hoping this talk is like my games, that you sort of know what you're going to get with me, but hopefully this is very different from all my other talks. Okay. I put this caveat almost always in front of my talks. Hey, if it works for you, you know, when you listen to my advice, use it. If it doesn't, don't. You know, this is basically is just saying you know what's best for you. Be careful when you take advice from anybody. Okay. This is just going to start with definitions of myself and sort of imply why you might want to listen to me at all when it comes to game dev. All my life I've been the math guy. 42 years ago I became a programmer. 36 years ago a software engineer, which really isn't the same as a programmer. And I urge anybody who thinks of themselves as a programmer to figure out how to start thinking of yourself as a software engineer. 18 years ago, I one step up from software engineer as a knowledge worker, and that's where you can convince your boss that you know more about what you do than they do, so maybe they ought to listen to you more. And that's a very useful thing to start thinking of yourself. 17 years ago, I became a game designer. Prior to the game designer, I had 4 years as a failed indie, but I didn't put that in the list because it's not something I continued to do. 13 years ago, I became an indie game developer. 10 years ago, I started thinking that I was really not quite just an indie game developer, but I was a true entrepreneur. And 6 years ago, I became what I think of myself as the curator of Clutter, that I have a responsibility to the players of my game that have been playing it for about 6 years then to take care of them. Okay, so the main point of this talk is actually negative times a negative equals a positive. That if you remove a negative from your life gets better. And a lot of people strive for that positive, but they don't look closely at their own life and whatever they're doing to figure out how to remove, the negative. And that's what the gist of this talk is. Removing the grind is a good thing. It was inspired by two things. I worked for a company called iWin, one of my first. I did a Mahjong quest for them. And I got so sick of hearing the game designer at the time say, it's hard to find the fun in a game. It's hard to find the fun. And I finally came up with an answer, which is it's my main mantra as a game designer or developer. I say, sure, it's hard to find the fun, but it's easy to find the not fun and stay the hell away from it. I was also inspired by the movie Rounders, where this guy's a nice safety player and he just grinds it out and the other players make fun of him. They say, you keep grinding out that rent money, Joe. It's noble work you're doing. As opposed to somebody who plays poker and takes bigger chances and stuff. They make fun of him. But I've never grinded out. But I use this as an inspiration that there's a middle ground between being wild and crazy versus, safe, and he's the grind. So, okay. So that's Mahjong. That's what I wrote for iWin. And the elevator pitch for Clutter would probably look like this today, which is Mahjong without borders. And the first thing you have to do is you have to replace the Chinese tiles with objects, and then you get rid of the objects entirely, and you don't have any really rules like Mahjong has. And that's what Clutter became. So I'm going to show you my first Clutter game, just for a minute. Not that long. That's enough. It's a simple, they call it a hog pile. It's just a mass of objects, and you pick off two at a time. And then it's all the variations that I've added to that over the year. So the great Clutter debate is, was it a $2 million genius idea or just $2 worth of good enough execution? And the real answer to that is, number one, ideas are a dime a dozen. You're never going to get me to say, oh, that was a phenomenal idea. That's so much better than these ideas, that idea, or whatever. Because it is the execution that matters. However, the real genius idea to the Clutter game is the fact that I thought a minor mechanic in an already existing game was worth exploring as a whole. And I think that's true of anything. I think later on I say, I don't believe there's any bad mechanic, there's only bad level design. And when that comes up again, I'll talk about that a little bit more. But I believe that this little thing of matching two things, a pile of objects, was worthy of exploration. And to me, that was the important idea. And again, worthy of exploration, worthy of my time and effort to put it in. The idea by itself, not worth it. Everybody has ideas. You have to act on them. Okay. And at the time, I spent the last year or so at Mahjong pitching games, and I was so arrogant that I said, pick a genre, any genre, and I'll do a game in it, because I got sick of pitching ideas and having them turn them down when I believed it was the execution that mattered. So I used to say this. So when it came to, I had to do this on my own, can I do this on my own? I picked the genre that was most popular at the time, which was hidden object games. And then I couldn't do a full-blown hidden object game in the way that they were currently popular, so I figured out a way I could do it and appeal to those people without being a true hidden object game. And I actually did it so well that Clutter is considered its own subgenre of hidden object games. Okay, there he is, just reminding you. But I want to show you that doing Clutter was not a grind, because there was always tons of variations. And these are all from the 14 games in order. So there's a lot of variations. After I went to Unity, I found these really cool object sets that help. I figured out how to do Clutter many, many different ways. Unity let me get into motion, where all the earlier pictures were all these flat, nothing moves on the screen other than the two objects you pick. In this one, all those three circles are rotating in Unity, and that's something I couldn't do under the old system. I made my own object sets just to make more puzzle games, more things that appealed to me that I felt I could push my audience towards. If I had put this in Clutter 1, there wouldn't have been a Clutter 2, because they would have run from this in droves, but I earned trust over time, and now I could give them this abstract set, and they would accept it. There's another one from later. I learned I can cut up any picture and make a puzzle from it. These also rotate. These also rotate. This is just another nice little object set that I think early on they would have rejected, but now it makes a nice little, it even looks like Mahjong, but again, there's no rules, so you don't have to pick from the ends and stuff. And now this is the trailer from my latest game that I'll just play for half a minute. And let's see if I can lower the volume. I don't know if that'll work. May not. That's my latest object set, these dice that are just nuts. Another set of abstract tiles. Okay. Okay, so I started thinking back of what was the first time in my life I, outed a grind. And it was actually in 7th grade. I've been a math guy my whole life. I walked up to my 7th grade math teacher after class one day and I said, I don't want to do the homework. He said, why? I said, you waste my time doing all the easy problems and I'd rather work on the harder ones. You're wasting my time. He said, come see me tonight after school. So I took the current chapter we were on and I went to the ending puzzles, the ending, what are they called? They're not puzzles, examples or whatever. Anyways, I worked them out, worked out the couple that I could do, in my head, and then I went to a couple of the harder ones and I worked them out. So I went to see him at 3 o'clock, and the first thing he did was he opened the book and he went right to the chapter I thought he would. He goes, do question 1. And I said, I looked at it and I just gave him the answer because it was easy. And he jumped to question 4 and that was easy too, and I looked at it. Then he went down to one of the last 2, which is the 2, I had done. And instead of asking for a piece of paper or anything, I just sort of stared at it and looked at it for a few seconds and gave him the right answer. And he looked at me and said, okay, you don't have to do your homework. Your test will just, count more. So I pulled that off and I was really happy. I was just jumping inside. But, and it never hurt me. I was honest. I really did resent doing the easy questions just for them to review when, I'd rather work on the harder stuff. So it wasn't really a lie. Okay. So as a game dev, there's a couple ways. You want to out the grind for yourself, but you also want to out the grind for your players. And one of the ways I do that, and Clutter is does this apparently more than any other game that I can find in the casual market, and I get high marks from my players that love the game, is I have tons of options. You can play it with quick start. You can play it with quick match. You can turn off the timer. You can turn off the story. If you don't like the tap penalty, you can get rid of that. If you don't like the icons at the beginning of a level, you can get rid of those. They can play it their way. I am the Burger King of games. Clutter is the Burger King of games. You have it your way. Okay. I've never had "Are you sure?" on exit in my game. And I've heard from a few of my players that love that. Love that extra little touch. This is one of the few repeat things I've said in other talks. But "Are you sure?" on exit is an insult to the player. And it's just developers' ego going, are you sure you want to leave my game? Why would you want to leave my game? You sure you want to do that? And it's an insult. They hit the button. Nowadays you have autosave. Nothing bad happens if you let them exit the game. On my game, they can exit immediately anyway, and they pick up right where they left off. So why would I ask them that? And I have no level gatekeeping. I used to make them do a puzzle 3 times, lose it 3 times before I'd let them go on to the next one. But in my games, when your timer goes up, if you're playing with a timer, you get this screen. And you're allowed to continue level right in the middle there, and just goes on without the timer, and you can finish it up, but you only get a blue status globe. You can play it again to try to get the green and beat the timer, or you can skip it to the next level. And if you skip it, you get a red, which is an incomplete. And later they can go back and play it. Okay. I'll check my time here. Okay, good. I repeated these slides just because of how it fits in here. So in one of my talks, I talked about the lottery ticket of time. And that's basically, instead of Netflixing and chilling when you have a spare moment, you do something to improve your future. And it might not pay off, that's why it's a lottery ticket. But you could, read a book, you could learn a new skill, you can improve at something, you can imagine your better future, and all of these were lottery ticket time. And the core idea here is everything you do is in preparation for a future that you can't predict. That was so important, I put it in the next game. I put it in I don't know if this is the last game or the game before this, but, I think it's 2 games back. And I tried to get my players, I won't go into the stories of my game, but they've gotten weird over the years. And a couple of years ago, for this game, Clutter 12, I took one of my talks that I first gave here, talking about time and the lottery tickets and stuff, and I worked that into telling them. So I sort of did the talk crossed with other things in my game. But I wanted them, that if they really understood this, they also, at any point, you can do something that ups your odds for improving your future. What this also implies, though, is you use your time wisely. You should always be looking for positive opportunities, but the core of this talk is you should also look to avoid negative situations. And you want to lower your tolerance for worse, okay? Something's bad in your life, you ought to be acting quickly. Because the longer you don't act, you're going to regret it later. Especially, every second in a bad situation lowers your odds for finding the better situation. That's true in romance. You're stuck with the wrong person. When you're stuck with the wrong person, your odds of meeting the right person really are low. I know it sucks being alone, but really, staying with a bad person, you're not going to meet the next person. Or if you do, you're going to meet somebody that wants you to cheat and do unethical things and bad things, so that's not good. You want to free yourself up from the bad situations so the good situations can arrive. It's also true in jobs. I'm not arguing that you should quit your job, but if you're unhappy with the job, start looking immediately. In fact, I believe even if you're happy in a job, you should always be. There's Glenn Ross has always be closing. I believe you should always be looking, no matter if you're happy. But if you're unhappy, it depends. If you're making so low money or something, you'd be better off quitting and spending full time looking for your job you really care about. Okay. And really, just move on. Don't worry about getting back the people, the bad road, just move on. Living well is always the best revenge. Okay, I'm going to take a minute to do my bad analogy. Because I was doing the negative equals a positive, and I'm the math guy, the core of this underneath of the subtext is all about how math can improve your life in ways, you don't understand. And I've hated people use the uncertainty principle and try to say that's why you can't tell somebody you're testing something because it'll, affect the results. They'll use wrong reasons from low-level science to justify something that don't hold up. But this is going to be me doing it sort of with a math bent and letting you know. So here's bad analogy. Everybody know what compound and simple interest is, right? Compound interest is better because instead of just the incremental improvement, it's the incremental times the incremental, that improves, and it's the curve that goes up as opposed to just linear out. So getting better at many little things is simple interest. Oh, I can do the cube. Oh, I can program in that. Oh, I can do that. But going deep and getting better and better at one thing is more like compound interest, because as you're getting deeper into the thing, that thing adds to what you already know on that thing. Okay? So it's more like compound interest than learning a bunch of little things everywhere. So going deep, you want to occasionally. So doing the one thing deeply. Everybody wants results, but nobody wants to stay focused. Because we're talking focus. The gap between your current life and the life you want is called focus. and focus 100% on one thing instead of doing 5 things with 20% focus each. And that's just my advice. You know, everybody has to juggle and do stuff, but, you know, that's my advice. Okay. Clutter, some of those variations in clutter are more like the linear ones because they only work for that thing. But a lot of the clutter variations, when I'm trying to think of them, if I think of a variation that can play well with all the other variations, that's one worth pursuing because it buys me more. It's more bang for the buck. So, and it's tough. You know, I created dragging, and dragging works with other things, but some things, some variations, again, play much well with others. For instance, black and white. You can take any of my puzzles, almost any one of my puzzles that has color in it, and you can just change it to a black and white, and it's, you know, it's a good match. It's a good new puzzle. And that's because black and white, you know, turning it to black and white just works for everything. Something else like, I'm trying to think of a bad example. Oh, fuzzy. I have this puzzle that is just fuzzy. So you swipe, everything's faded out, and as you swipe the mouse, things fade in. That's not as good of a puzzle because in that rotation, that's not going to be a good puzzle while everything's rotating. It's not going to be a good puzzle black and white versus color. It's just not. It's not going to work well with anything else. But it's a nice variation as a standalone puzzle. But it doesn't buy me as much because I can't use it as often. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. My franchise effect is also like compound interest. And this is all my sales since I started. The only thing to really note here is if I never did a second Clutter game, that first game would have made me about $60,000. And as you can see, once I did the second game, it lifted it. The third game, you can see the lift going on of that blue at the bottom. And that game still brings in about $1,000 a month and has earned me about $250,000. But that would not have happened if I did separate games. Would not have happened. And the other thing here is you get to see 3 slopes. So there's that first flat slope. Let's see if I can point here. Right here, that's really flat. Then 3, it really took off for a while and kind of flat again. But this is when I went to Unity, so I can get games out a little quicker. This is the only thing that keeps me ahead of the shrinking market curve in the casual PC down space. That the customers, you know, every year still get iPads and fancy phones for Christmas, and they stop playing on the PC. Okay, and the last one. Learn tools and focus on tools that work together well. Again, a tool that just works by itself is only going to be like, you know, the simple interest, but if you get tools and learn how to have the tools work to other tools, then you're more in the compound state. Okay, this is another one I put in my recent game, because I somehow wanted to tell them about my early love of magic and ventriloquism for some reason. Magic is believing in yourself. If you can do that, you can make anything happen. This is how I've been telling my stories now for almost all of Clutter, but they looked a little different in the earlier games. But I got the notion early on that when they finished a level, they would get a picture, they would get a quote, and they would get a story snippet. And they can turn all this off really easily. But this was the easy way to tell a story for me, and I stick with it. And I think I mentioned that later, but getting something that works saves you time, right? As soon as you have something that's good enough and it works, why reinvent the wheel each time? So this I can change the specifics already in it. I could even move where the text shows or something, but why? They get used to this. Oh, and this is from the help system in my game. You can review the entire story by itself without being in the levels that play the game. Okay. The reason I put it in here is I wanted to do this quote. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. That's Arthur C. Clarke. And I want you to learn and love your tools because you want to be the magician. Okay? You want to know your tools so well that you can do things that just amaze people. You know, And if you can explain it, how you did it with the tool, they go, oh, that was easy. Just like a magician explaining how they did a card trick. Whenever a magician explains a trick, they go, oh, that was easy. And they don't do it because of it. But same way with your tools. But you want to be the magician. Okay. This is another one from my game. And the main point of this is I wanted to explain the main reason I'm still an optimist is no matter how bad things are in your life, you can always look around and say, what can I improve? And not only what can I improve, what's bothering me that I can get rid of? One of my habits that I do when I'm angry at somebody, whether it's my wife, my son, anything, if I notice myself stewing and getting angry or whatever and stuck in my mind, I go do something productive. It might be nothing more than cleaning out, putting the dishes away or something, cleaning up my room. Because it gets me out of my mindset. I do something productive, I feel good, and I don't wallow in the crap. So, okay. So a lot of reticutive time that I missed is this talk, outing the grind. So that led me, what else is missing in that, I want to check my time? Okay, we're good. What else am I missing that's connected to both the lottery ticket and outing the grind? And I had a couple things I wanted to talk about. So in every job I've ever held, when you try to improve yourself at work, your boss doesn't usually want you to. It's usually really hard for them, unless you're lucky, it's hard for you to get them to pay you go to learn a new tool, unless it's critical. And they won't send you to a conference unless it's critical. In fact, what they want you to do is they never want to teach you to swim. They want you to tread water faster, okay? But if you took the moment to swim, it would be better for them and better for the future of the company. So early on, I rationalized. You can tell me whether you think this is horrible or not. But, I need to talk about one other thing before I go. So from day one, as a programmer, they've talked about quick and dirty versus slow and clean. They said those are your only two options. You can be quick and dirty, you can be a hacker, or you can do slow and methodical or whatever. But that's bull. With better techniques and tools or whatever, you can be quick and clean over time. So I never believed that lie. I'm going to come back to that. The 10%, and then I'm going to go back. So at that company that doesn't want me to learn how to swim, I justified that I could steal 10% of my time to work on self-improvement. That I'm not going to tell them because I'm not crazy. I don't want them to get fired. But if I'm going to go read a book on if I'm going to go improve or learn a tool or research something, number one, I was pretty fast as a programmer anyway, so they probably couldn't tell. But I justified if I learned it, it would pay off down the road. So for instance, I learned awk on my own, and sure enough, a few weeks later, I did a project in awk that easily saved the company 3.5 man months. Because I did it with awk in two weeks, and they were allocating like 4 months for the project. And if I hadn't learned awk by myself, I wouldn't have learned that I could have used awk to do that. Okay, so that's the 10% having to do with work. Okay, so again, core of the talk. Another time, I have two little stories on how -1 times -1 equals 1. The first two are in basketball here. I hated coaches in high school. I hate coaches everywhere that only look at the positive. That kid's so fast. That kid's, he's strong, fast, whatever. Yeah, but how many times does he throw the ball away? How many times does it dribble off his foot? Okay? To accurately assess anybody in a sport, you have to take the positive things they do and subtract the negatives, the bad things they do. Okay? I so much believed in this. My coach called me over one day and told me I was hogging the ball too much on the press, that I had to give up the ball sooner when press was happening. And I said to him, have I ever lost the ball in the press? He said, no, not that I can remember. I said, so you want me to give it to big guys while I'm coming up the court so that they can throw it away on the next pass? That's what you want me to do. And he just sort of shook his head. I said, I'll tell you what. I'll keep doing it my way, and the first time I lose the ball in the press, I'll start doing it your way. And he sort of shook his head at me. We were friends as well as coach, and he got my point, and he let me keep doing it. Okay. Right after college, I was still working UPS, working only 20 hours a week, but making pretty good money at the time. I took a second job. I did not take that job to make more money. Does anybody, raise your hand on this one. Does anybody know why I took that second job? Go ahead. No. So what? No. In the core, it's up here with -1 times -1. What's equal to make more money? What's the equivalent in the negative? Spend less money. Okay? Those quarters represent video game arcade machines. I had so much free time. I was only working 20 hours a week. I had so much free time. I was just spending way too much time at the arcade dumping in quarters. And I took the second job more than anything else. It was just answering phones on a weekend, so I didn't have as much free time. And it sounds odd, but true story. Again, removing negatives out in the grind, claim your 10%. So we'll talk about the 10%. As self-perception, if you have an annoying trait, if you know enough, if you're self-aware enough to know that some things you do annoy people, I'm not asking you to change that. I want you to be yourself. But if you can rein in 10% of whatever annoys other people, you'll learn how to be more successful. I'm a nerd. I'm still a nerd. And I was such a nerd in freshman year in college, I used to wear a little English driving cap and carry an umbrella the whole time. That was a little too annoying, okay? No, that's putting a target in your back. You don't need to put you can scale it back that 10%, and you'll find out the 10% less is more. You also want to know your 10%. And you want to know your core, the stuff you won't give up on. And you really want to know that and protect that. That's what you won't sell out. You'll never do that. I don't want to salute somebody, even though I came close to being in the Navy one day, But I know my 10%. And you want to protect it. You really do. And that's, again, I can't give you specifics on that, but in my game in Clutter, I went away. In the sixth game, I hired 2 young kids that were right out of college that did a great job making a more beautiful Clutter that told a better story that the marketing and publishers liked, but my players said not enough Jonas. And the next game, I went right back to cranking up Jonas and talking about myself more and weird stuff like that, and it did better. So you got to know what your 10%, and you really want to protect that. Okay. So this is I just wanted to share. I got lucky with Clutter. Clutter was not only a lottery ticket of time, it was one that paid off. And the main philosophy was, it was just good enough to get it out the door to see how it would do. And I came this close to not doing a sequel. But I'm glad I did, because getting the next one out the door led me to see the franchise effect and led me to stick with it. And it's not only a lottery ticket of time, that I invested in, it paid off. I hope you guys are as lucky as I am on that. Yeah, we're fine. Okay. Ikigai. Ikigai. I got 2 Japanese words I wanted to share. This one is, and I'm lucky. I really feel like I hit Ikigai a few years ago. And I've known about this concept for years. And I wish all of you can hit this at some point, where you find a job, what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs. The reason it's here is becoming the curator of Clutter sort of pushed me beyond this. That, I realized that having my own digital IP franchise affected me even beyond this concept of how nice it is to feel like I have my purpose. And I wanted to share that. I get all my money from royalties. It's a trip. Some months when I'm on Big Fish and a month I get a big check. But most months it's just this consistent. And I have enough. I'm not rich, but I'm so glad I'm not working for somebody else, and I don't have real money concerns because I live within my and this varied paycheck is, to give you an example, as soon as I get done this talk, I'll probably check my email, and I might have had a direct sale from my own website. Okay? I usually have one or two a day, and it's $20. And I think of them in my brain. I go, ka-ching, It's just a weird effect, and I kiddingly use it as almost like rolling dice in the 20, I look and I go, oh, I guess I should have done that because the universe just rewarded me with $20 because it's that random. And it's just, I don't know, it's just another thing to have fun with that I never expected, as a side effect. Can't say enough about that, but you guys can all understand what it is, various times I create something in my game or think about doing something in my game, and I hear one of my bosses or a producer say, "You can't do that, Joe." I hear that old voice, which was said to me many times in my life. And now it's, yes, I can. I don't care because I can do it. It's been challenging dealing with the market pressures, but it's been a fun it's a fun challenge. It's nice. Again, the franchise keeps me head of the shrink. I'm so grateful for that, but it's kind of fun to see, what should I do next? What, pick and choose. And I take my responsibilities of being a curator seriously. I have fans that if I stopped, they would be let down. They would be disappointed. They're over 1,500 people have found my website. I'm not allowed to have clicks in my games, but because I brand Puzzles by Joe, they found me and they, buy directly from me. And not all of them, but a lot of them, but they give me feedback and stuff. And it's a community, and it came out of sort of nowhere. And I really am the curator. I listen to them, and I try to give them what they want. And I've also, it's amazing what longevity does over time, especially with my distributors and how they treat me or other business people. Just surviving a length of time is a noble pursuit. I mean, and you can, I don't say you can leverage it. It's not like but things are different. They look at you a little differently, right? It's like being a one-hit wonder in music versus being somebody like Elton John or Billy Joel that's been around for years. And I don't know when it is for them. I mean, for some people, it's second or third album they start happening. But some people, there's even bands that never have they have small hits, but they've been around 20 years and now they're touring again because there's longevity. There's something that longevity brings. Okay, so the other Japanese word is kaizen, which is constant self-improvement. And it's a fuzzy concept because now they tie it into agile software development, but really it just means continuous improvement. And way back, I think it just meant continuous self-improvement. So I wanted to share a couple things from my game that, as a developer, because I wanted to hit that part. So these two things are my config files. You guys would do them, any developers in here would probably do them in JSON. I use a flat file approach. But you can tell, that's hard. You can look at maybe 2 puzzles at a time and so forth. But just recently, like 2 years ago, I finally got the brilliant idea to add a semicolon and so put more on the screen. Now I can, this was something that I looked at. It was taking me too long to review a game or go find a puzzle, or just taking me too long. So I spent some time saying, how could I improve this process? And I'd already spent the time a little bit, because this is what this column and row does. I'll have like 100 puzzles, but it'll really be just 10 puzzles crossed with 10 different object sets, or a couple other parameter tweets. But anyways, this is all done, and it really only took me, it took me less than an hour once I got the idea, but it saved so much time. This is my story toggles. This is in they all work by their name. So that story toggle, even though it has story as a title, is probably called story toggle. And just by naming it, it can look in the help file and find out that stuff on the right. It knows its default because I've attached a button handler that knows about toggles. And when you toggle it, it either does something, because it just magically happens, or anybody within my program can go, if story toggle is on, do something. And I don't have to do it. I did this after I think I did 4 of them manually. And when I did 4 of them, I said, no, I gotta automate this because I want more and more, toggles in my game. Okay. So this is just this. So within the game itself, I've had many things where I constantly think of, I don't want my game to be a grind. I mean, sometimes they can play a level for 7 minutes, but it's more like 3 to 5. And I used to want them to see the old school was hunt, find, hunt, a lot of hunting, not much finding. And now it's more like you just find, and occasionally you get stuck. It's a quicker game. Now I still have the old ones represented, but I wanted it to be more Twitch-like without being Twitch, because my customers are women over 40 to 60 with some disposable income. They're not like button mashers who play console games, right? But I wanted them to have more fun. In my game, one of the rules of thumb: if you don't like a puzzle, the next one will be different, and they all know that. And I keep it interesting and varied. I was going to talk about, again, how do you make dragging fun? Well, the way you make dragging fun is you give them just enough to drag, just enough stuff that doesn't match, so that they're not constantly matching. But once they've dragged everything, they've missed a couple matches, and it takes up almost the entire screen. And then they have to find those last few matches. So some people do things like they keep all the reds together, keep all the colors together, They come up with strategies. Another way to make dragging fun is on a regular clutter screen, it might be 50 objects. On a dragging one, it'll be 30. Right? There's many ways. And I believe, like I said before, there's no bad mechanic, just bad level design. A good mechanic, you should be able to, at one end, it's just an activity. It's very simple, a kid can do it. And at the high end, it's really hard, right? And you should be able to make a puzzle from a mechanic at any of that range. Okay. Let me check my time. 43 minutes, good. So we're at the kitchen sink, which is just a bunch of ideas I wanted to quickly just pop up there. I'll take questions on them at the end. Rule of 3. Third time you do something, automate. First time you might talk yourself out of it. Second time, you might be so pressed for time you go, but you do it you're going to do it 10 times, okay? Purpose matters. It's totally okay to break the rule if you keep its intent. And I believe that in my entire life. Now, you don't want to break traffic laws and stuff like that, but if you have a rule about something, people that keep rules and don't know the intent are the worst people in life. My apologies if I insult anybody here. Most people that are rule-based that are inflexible don't know that about themselves anyway, so I'm probably not insulting them. But basically, if you're doing something for a purpose and you have this rule of thumb or rule whatever, and the rules get in the way, you can get rid of it, especially in programming. Add constraints early. Constraints just make the task easier. Once I decided this was going to be about math and -1 times -1, and I can talk about other math things. I almost talked about calculus, slopes of lines. It breaks it in. 80-20 rule. Get to the 80 quick. Do it quick. Do the easiest first, just like in test tasting. When you're taking a test, if you see a hard thing, you should skip it, finish everything, then come back to the hard ones. Same way with your work. The 80-20 rule is the first 80, takes 20% of your time, but you want to be even quicker than that, because that last 20 does take 80. You just want to be quick, get into that 80, because you can lock it in and just stop thinking about it. You want to get to your end stuff. Avoid premature optimization. This is mostly in code, but in life too. Don't fix something if it's not broken. Let your task tell you what's critical. Wait, hold off a little bit. Juggling. Life's juggling, and so forth. In juggling, when you learn to juggle, you want to follow the flow, but you don't want to chase. To learn juggling wrong, what you do is you try to keep juggling even when it's getting away from you. No, what you want to do is let them fall and just pick them up and start again. And that's actually true in life and whatever. Don't chase. In programming, sometimes it's called shaving the yak, I think, where you start out to do one thing and then something gets in the way, so you start solving that, and then something else gets in the way and you start solving that, and you end up what they call shaving the yak, which is you're doing something that has nothing to do with your original problem. And there might be a different way to solve your original problem. Worse before bed, I talked about this before, you want to bottom out more quickly. If you're on the tangent that's going downhill, recognize it and stop it right then. You don't have to wait until you hit rock bottom. You don't. A lot of people do, but you don't. It's smarter if you don't. Most people hate losing more than we like winning. This is true. Use it for your motivation. My motivation in this category is I love proving people wrong. Love it. Joe, nobody will ever buy just a collection of puzzles. That's not true. And it motivates. Confirmation bias. You want to learn from the losers and avoid their strategy. Much better than going after the winners, because first of all, you don't want to engage in wishful thinking because it kills your good luck. Wishful thinking isn't rational, and you're just throwing it away if you're wishful thinking too much. I think the winning one's next one. But it was software is forever Legos. They're interchangeable and reusable, and you want to find your one way early and start building up something you can keep adding to. And that's what's nice about software, and especially like Unity. It's permanent Legos, really. Said that before. Listen to your customers that love your game but still complain about something. Ignore the haters. I don't know. I may have lost a slide here. Anyways, so make the assumption of good intentions in both your players and game dev people. Do you know people that get angry too quickly? I had a guy I worked with. I used to go. He was the epitome of the opposite of this. I would say, "Hey, Lorenzo, that's a nice shirt you're wearing today," and he would go, "What was wrong with the shirt I wore yesterday?" There's people, but I learned that, especially like game devs at other companies, they're just trying to do their job. And maybe something negative's happened at one of my distributors that affects me, but, the people I'm complaining to, they're just trying to do their job too. They're not out to get me. They're not, there's nothing personal there. And same way with the players. Although, sometimes if you let them down, they really go off the deep end. But mostly the players, when they're giving me negative feedback, they're just trying to help. And again, this is you don't want to be prematurely pessimistic. This is, again, you don't want to fix problems before they arrive. Let them arrive. So the main point of this talk has been a negative times a negative is a positive. Ooh, I'm almost done. This is great. And he was the other inspiration. But it's never been a grind for me because I grind each and every day. And that's true. And that's who I am, right there. That's the end of my talk. Any questions? Oh, I got one for Mike, though. So how much repeat? Oh, bull. Oh, yeah. I asked Mike how much of this talk was a repeat. He said 75%. He, I believe, was being facetious. Any other questions? Go ahead.
You mentioned you don't like a puzzle, then the next one will be different.
Yeah.
You also mentioned automation. Are you handcrafting each of these puzzles, or are you using procedural generation?
Repeat the question. So he asked me if I'm hand generating all my puzzles or whether it's procedural. So it is config file. All my puzzles are randomly generated off basic configs. So that first puzzle is just normal. number of objects, number of things in the background, and so forth. And then I have a bunch of parameters like, are the background pieces interwoven? Is it a black and white? Are they split in half? Are they distributed in half the screen? How interwoven are they within themselves? Like, are the matches always sitting on top, which a lot of times they are, but they're also, sometimes you have to hunt and so forth. So there's tons of parameters. Then that one slide I showed you, when I do some of the extra, not the main, I have a main 100 level quest that's pretty handcrafted, but then I have other areas that usually take some of the puzzles from the main quest and then will allow you to play them. They might have been played with donuts over there. Over here they can be played with donuts or shoes or hats or whatever. And it's a little more complex than that, but I can get a game out now in about 6 to 7 months that has 2,400 puzzles. And some of them, by the way, so I have some picture puzzles that play, I think, over 4 or 5 lands. The new pictures are the only, it's a content thing. I don't have to change anything in those 500 puzzles because I already have a set that lets you, that slider puzzle you saw with the lady in the blue, you know, that can be cut up different ways. That can have black and white in it too. There's many things. So all that changes in the next game is there's a new picture there. Okay? So there's many ways I save time and stuff. Hope that answered. You had a question? Go ahead. Yeah. For me, again, when I think of a new game mechanic or a new variation, I want it to play well with everything else, and then it influences my level design. Occasionally, while doing the level design, since I'm a jack of all trades, I'll come up with something that it can't do, that I want it to do. So it's a really tight feedback loop. It really is. So it's, you know, they can use Mahjong layouts now. And I didn't put Mahjong in the game. I put Mahjong in the game to have Mahjong tiles play. But then when I realized I could use the Mahjong placement of the tiles and put my clutter objects in them without the rules, I did it. And then once I did that, I realized I wanted to overlap the Mahjong tiles, which you can't do because that wouldn't look good in a Mahjong game. You get what I'm saying? So I went back and affected the Mahjong so that when it didn't have tiles, it could put them closer together and overlap and do other cool things. So it's a combination of right. Right. It goes back and forth. Usually starting with the new mechanic, and then as I'm trying to create interesting puzzles, then it often adds new requirements. And again, I'm the one of the reasons I'm quick enough is I don't have to explain it to anybody or get anybody's permission. Really, that's death by committee is probably what kills most good game ideas and stuff and slows the process down. So, any other questions? Yeah, I get incredibly high all my levels are replayable. The only ones that aren't is I do some quote box puzzles that are based on quotes, and once you play them, they're kind of boring to play again. But every one of my clutter levels is randomly generated, and it's randomly generated to create an interesting puzzle, and it'll use the same object set or something, but it won't look like. It'll be fun each time. So the answer is almost every one of my levels is replayable. So now the jigsaw puzzles are replayable in that a jigsaw puzzle is replayable, but the pieces change. So think of a jigsaw puzzle that uses the same picture, but every time you play it, it's shaped differently. The cutouts are different. So it's replayable, but it's not quite replayable as much as the Clutter games are. Any other questions? Go ahead. So ChatGPT wouldn't know, and he asked me, could I use ChatGPT AI to help me? And the answer is, for most of what I do, no, because it doesn't know enough about Jonas and the games and so forth, or even to do the story. But the last guy, I hire occasionally somebody to do things for me. And one of the things, because I've done them too much, is go out to the web and give me 100 new quotes that are inspirational that can be used in my quote box puzzles that are between a certain length and a certain length. And he actually used ChatGPT to not only do that, not only grab them, but then sort them in the order and put them in parameters that my program understood. And he gave me that code, which I haven't really understood yet, but he used it for that. So he did something that usually takes somebody 10 hours to 15 hours, and he got it done in about an hour and a half, and it's reusable. So that's kind of nice. Anything else? I think I'm done anyways on time. Right? Just about. Thank you much. You can find me at Joe Cassavaugh or Puzzles by Joe if you want to, ask any questions or further correspond. And I have a card on me if anybody wants that. So, thanks, and thanks again, Andrew and Rod. I don't think did I mention you guys' name when I saw the pictures? I just said those guys. What? Yeah. Anyways, always nice to be back at CIMFest.